The transport shuttle smelled like recycled air and 3 different species sweat. Vreth sat near the back, arms folded, watching the UGC Meridian grow in the viewport. Big ship, multi-deck, mixed crew. The kind the Coalition built when it wanted species working together whether they chose to or not. Vreth had not chosen this assignment. The Carvosi Council had chosen her for it, which was a different thing entirely. She pressed one hand to the viewport glass. Cold. On Carveth, cold was information. It meant the night cycle was coming, and the night cycle brought out the things that could kill even a trained Carvosi if she got careless. Cold meant pay attention. Here it was just temperature. The shuttle docked. She gathered her kit and walked into the Meridian. The gravity hit her first. 1G, Earth standard, because the humans in the Coalition had made their planets pull the default across all shared vessels, and no one had successfully argued against it. Vreth was built for 1.6G. At 1.0, she felt almost weightless, like she could knock the walls loose by leaning too hard. She kept her movements deliberate. The crew was assembled at the docking bay entrance. Mixed group. An Orvani male she didn't recognize. 2 Grathi near the back. A Sulvan. And humans, 4 of them, standing close together the way people do in a new place when they haven't figured out what they think of it yet. Most of them kept their distance. One of the Grathi took a small step back when she made eye contact. Good. That was the right response. Then one of the humans stepped forward. No claws. No exoskeleton. Skin that would lose an argument with a blunt edge. Tall for his species, which still put him at roughly her shoulder. He extended one hand, palm open, fingers loose. Lieutenant Marin, he said. Welcome to the Meridian. Vreth looked at the hand. Open palm, no weapon. She read it as submission and took it, gripping once. Brief. He did not wince. She noticed that. Vreth, combat specialist, 3rd rank. Marin introduced the rest. She moved through the names. Grail, an older Orvani who nodded once and said nothing. 2 more humans. And then the last one. Her name was Sova. She stood a step apart from the other humans. When Marin got to her, she didn't offer her hand. She gave Vreth a single nod. Flat. No performance in it. Vreth returned it. That was the most useful greeting she'd had in the docking bay. The orientation briefing ran an hour. Standard material. Coalition protocols, duty schedules, emergency procedures. Vreth had read most of it before boarding. She spent the hour watching the room instead. Grail sat in the corner and asked no questions. She had a feeling he already knew the answers. The humans split into 2 loose groups. Marin sat near Grail and made quiet conversation. The other 3 were together, but Sova was slightly apart from the pair beside her. She watched the briefing facilitator the whole time and said nothing. Vreth watched Grail watch the humans. He noticed her watching and gave her nothing back. Just patience, the kind that comes from already knowing how something ends. She made a note to pay more attention to him. Her quarters were small and efficient. The bunk was built for something without Carvosi bone density, but it would hold. She set her kit against the wall. The ship hummed, low and constant. Engines, life support, 100 small systems cycling. She had been on ships before and had never fully trusted them. On Carveth, steady sounds warned you. They shifted before things went wrong. A ship just hummed the same way no matter what was happening. She found that unsettling in a way she would not have said aloud. She sat on the bunk and opened her comm, wrote a message to her unit. Kept it short. Mission looked routine. Ship was solid. Crew was mixed but capable enough on paper. She went through the species she'd met, briefly, and mentioned the humans last. One line about them. She read it over and sent it without changing anything. The word she used, in Carvosi, translated roughly as harmless. She put the comm down. Outside the viewport, the stars didn't move. The ship carried her deeper into Coalition space, away from the one world she had always understood completely. She had 30 years on the hardest planet the galaxy had ever classified. Nothing about this assignment was going to change that. She turned off the light and lay on the bunk and let the ship hum. She was not worried. Nobody argued about going first in the drill rotation. Vreth didn't wait to be asked. She arrived at the simulation bay before the rest of the team, checked the equipment configuration, noted the target settings, and stepped into the ring. The crew filtered in and spread along the walls. Grail came last, found a corner, and opened his datapad. Watching. Vreth moved through the combat simulation at full Carvosi baseline. 11 targets, 40 seconds, no misses. The obstacle course followed, calibrated to a Class 7 environment. She finished in 91 seconds. She stepped out and stood against the wall. No one said anything for a moment. The Sullivan crew member checked the results board twice. The humans ran after the Graphy pair. Marin went first. Controlled, clean, decent instincts. He missed 2 targets. His course time was acceptable. Nothing she would have looked twice at. Sova went second. She moved differently from Marin. Where Marin was deliberate, Sova was quiet in a way Vreth didn't have a word for in Carvosi. Not silent, not still. More like a person doing something they had done so many times that thinking about it had become unnecessary. She missed 1 target. Her course time was slightly better than Marin's. Midway through the obstacle run, the simulation threw a sequence change. Burst panel, debris, rerouted path. Designed to test adaptation. Vreth had recalibrated in under a second when it hit her. Sova recalibrated in roughly the same window, picked a different route through the debris, and finished 2 seconds behind Vreth's equivalent time. Vreth made a small adjustment to her read of the human and said nothing about it. The real thing came at the end. The final stage was close-range engagement, automated response units, no warning on direction. Sova took a direct hit from one of them. Not a graze. Center mass. The Orvani observer drew a sharp breath. Sova went to one knee. 1 breath. Then she got up and finished the drill. Vreth watched her walk out of the ring. No visible pain response. No acknowledgement that anything had interrupted her. Just continued. The way someone continues when they step over a rock in the road. She wasn't sure what to do with that. She put it aside and moved on. But it stayed where she put it. The cargo incident happened 2 days later. Coolant system failure in the lower bay. Pressure breach into a row of bio-containers the Meridian was transporting under Coalition Health Protocol. 3 different class-level biosphere samples. Not weapons. Close enough to dangerous that a breach at pressure mattered. The alarm pulled crew from 3 decks. Vreth reached the bay in 40 seconds. Read the room immediately. 2 containers already venting, 1 more on the edge. Crew coming in from 2 entry points with nobody calling positions. She called positions. The team responded. She handled the critical container herself, sealed the breach manually, took the chemical exposure on her forearm without reaction. The compound was weaker than Carvith's atmosphere in dry season. What she paid attention to, while she worked, was the humans. They talked through the entire thing. Not panicked. Short phrases, half sentences, and somehow the right person moved to the right place without being told twice. Near the end of the containment, one of them said something that made 2 of the others exhale a short sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but wasn't nothing either. In the middle of an active chemical breach. Vreth didn't understand what was said. She wasn't sure it was a joke. Whatever it was, it came at completely the wrong time, and all 3 of them kept moving like it hadn't happened. After the bay was cleared, Grail came up beside her in the corridor. "You watch them," he said. "I watch everything. It's how I'm still alive." "Of course." He walked quietly for a moment. "You should ask them where they come from." "You've said that." "Yes." She looked at him. His face gave nothing back. Not smug, not trying to be cryptic. Just patient, the way old things are patient. Like he was waiting for something that was already in motion. She didn't ask him to explain. That night she lay in her bunk and kept coming back to the same moment. Sova hitting the floor, staying there for exactly 1 breath, and then getting up and finishing like the floor had simply been uneven. She turned it over for longer than made sense, and still didn't find a clean reason for it. She told herself she wasn't going to keep thinking about it. She kept thinking about it. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, and the planet opened below them, green and wrong in ways Vreth couldn't immediately list. Cloud base sitting yellow. The things shaped like trees growing too tall, too close, in too many directions at once. The signal from the down vessel was somewhere inside all that. She checked her kit. Sova, across the cabin, was doing the same. Grail had his sensor pack. The other 2 on the team were Sullivan and Orvani, both experienced, neither comfortable with what they were looking at. "Class 7, the Sullivan said. "Worse than the datasheet," Grail said. Vreth said nothing. She had been in Class 7 environments before. On Carvith, that was the kind of place you took new recruits to show them what a manageable situation felt like. The shuttle found a clearing that barely fit it and came down hard. The ramp opened. The air came in humid and layered, something biological underneath it she couldn't place. The ground shifted slightly under her first step. Not loose. Something living in the soil. Fine. They moved toward the beacon in formation. The forest closed in on both sides. Sensors flagged movement in the upper levels. Multiple signatures, large. Vreth tracked the positions without changing pace. Predator or prey behavior would show itself soon enough. They found the downed ship in 30 minutes. One survivor, badly hurt. One leg useless. He was conscious enough to talk. Equipment failure, bad landing, 2 days waiting. His luck had held on the crash. It was about to run out. The megafauna came when the team stopped moving. 4 of them. Low, 8-limbed, heads that were mostly jaw. They moved with the patience of things that live by ambush. Still until the distance was right, then fast. Vreth moved first. She went in direct on the nearest one, inside its range before it could use what it had, and ended it in 4 seconds. Already moving to the second before the first landed. The team spread. Sova took the left flank. Grail covered the rear. The Sullivan and Orvani got behind the survivor and started moving him back. The survivor went down again. He slipped from the Orvani's grip and hit the ground. Couldn't get up. Vreth's read was instant. He couldn't move without help. Someone helping him wasn't fighting. 2 animals still active. The math on Carveth in this situation was something she had understood since she was old enough to understand anything. She didn't say it. She moved toward the second animal. Sova broke formation. Vreth saw it at the edge of her vision. Sova moved to the survivor, got underneath him, shifted his weight onto her shoulders and stood. One arm taking his weight. One arm keeping her weapon up. She pushed through the gap between the remaining animals and kept firing with whatever angle she had. The math said this was wrong. One fighter cut in half, carrying extra weight, mid-engagement. Nothing in that calculation worked. Except it worked. Sova didn't drop him. Didn't stop firing. When the last animal was down, every single person in the team was upright and moving. The survivor included. They reached the shuttle. Ramp sealed. Off the ground. On the ride back, Vreth sat across from Sova. Sova had one hand on the survivor's arm, talking to him quietly. He was steadier for it. She held him with her right hand. Her left arm was sitting at the wrong angle. Not fatigue wrong. Structural wrong. Vreth looked at it and understood before she asked. Your arm? Sova glanced down at it. Yeah. When I picked him up. Second engagement. You carried him on a broken arm. Sova's face was even. Not performing bravery. Just level. We weren't done yet. Vreth had no answer. She turned forward and watched the yellow cloud layer come back up around the shuttle. She ran Sova's logic through her head. Carried him because they weren't finished. The arm broke during the carry. Still not finished. So she kept going. In Carvosi terms, this was either irrational or it was something that didn't have a name in Carvosi, and Vreth was no longer sure which one it was. She stopped looking for the error in it on the 4th pass. She might not have the right tools to find it. Vreth did not think of herself as someone who checked on people. She stood outside the medical bay for a moment, hand on the door panel, and went in anyway. Sova was on the treatment bed, arm being set by the medical unit. She looked up when Vreth came in, then looked back at her arm. Vreth pulled the chair from the corner and sat near the bed. Neither of them said anything. You want to ask something? Sova said. Yes. Go ahead. The arm. You knew it was broken while you were still carrying him. I figured it out after I picked him up. Maybe during. I wasn't paying much attention to it. But the pain changed my grip, Sova said. Didn't change whether I was going to keep going. Vreth waited to see if there was more to the sentence. There wasn't. She asked if all humans were like this. Sova said more or less yes. Not a trained thing, not specific to her. Closer to a default. Humans needed a better reason than pain to stop. Vreth asked what a better reason looked like. Sova thought about it. If stopping would actually save the people around me, that would do it. Vreth turned this over. It wasn't irrational. It was just a different set of numbers than the ones she'd been running. She asked where Sova was from. Sova said Earth. Vreth said she knew that and asked what it was actually like. Sova was quiet for a moment. You want to see it? They moved to the mess hall. Arm in a brace. Sova opened Earth files on the table display and started talking the way people talk about somewhere they know well. Not selling it. Not warning. Just describing. She started with the ocean. Most of the planet's surface. Deeper in places than the meridian was long. poorly mapped even now because the pressure at the deepest points made sustained exploration difficult. Things living down there that had stopped needing eyes. Things that made their own light because the surface light had never reached them and never would. Things that had been there, in the dark, for longer than the Carvosi had written language. Vreth listened. Land predators next. Sova named them, described their ranges and their behaviors. Some of the patterns Vreth recognized. Ambush structures similar to Carvoth fauna. Size ranges in the same order. Then Sova mentioned, almost as an aside, that most of them had been losing ground for thousands of years because humans kept moving into it. You're smaller than most of them, Vreth said. A lot of them, yes. You moved into their territory anyway. Sova didn't say this was brave or impressive. She said, we kept going. That's mostly the whole story. Then she mentioned diseases. Vreth hadn't thought to ask about diseases. On Carvoth, the planet's biology built resistance the same way it built predators, by killing what couldn't handle it. She had assumed Earth worked the same way. It didn't. Sova described the disease history the same way she described everything else. Straight. One outbreak, a respiratory pathogen, had killed over 50 million humans in 2 years. She said it the way you'd say the weather was rough last season. It happened. It was bad. After it, they buried the dead, and the cities came back, and more people were born. They kept going. Vreth said nothing for a moment. She was doing the math on 50 million dead in 2 years. That number was larger than the entire population of some coalition species. And after it, the humans had rebuilt and continued. After the 50 million, she said. What happened next? Sova looked at her. We got back to work. That was the whole answer. Vreth looked at the display. File still open. The ocean. The predators. The disease map. A world that had been finding new ways to kill whatever lived on it for millions of years, and had ended up with these creatures. No armor. No claws. No venom. Still here. She stayed in the mess hall after Sova left. The files were still open and she kept reading, not looking for anything specific, just reading. The thing she had been certain of for 30 years had cracked somewhere in the last hour, and she could feel where the edges were. She didn't try to push them back together. She read until the corridor lights shifted to night and the ship went quiet, and then she kept reading. She found the Earth archive files deep in the Coalition database and did not stop reading until the ship's lights had cycled to night dim and every corridor outside her quarters had gone quiet. The Meridian's database was thorough. Coalition records, species assessments, planetary hazard classifications, contact histories going back 3 centuries. She spent the first hour in the official documentation. Class ratings, biosphere breakdowns, atmospheric and geological hazard reports. Earth's biosphere entry was 14 pages. Carvoth's was 11. She checked Earth's official coalition hazard rating. Class 8 on biological density. She sat with that for a moment. Carvoth was also Class 8. She had never heard of another Class 8. She had not known there was one. She kept reading. The cumulative threat assessment factored in biology, atmospheric conditions, evolutionary pressure, and the behavior of the planet's dominant species. Earth scored Class 9. Same as Carvoth. She read that line 3 times. Then she opened the history files. She had expected conflict records. Most species with competitive social structures had them. What she hadn't expected was the scope. Carvosi conflict followed patterns. Seasonal, resource-driven, clear causes with clear ends. Humans had been in organized large-scale conflict across their entire recorded history, and the reasons covered territory, food, belief systems, written words, and things she didn't have clean translations for. They had fought wars involving hundreds of millions at once. They had built weapons capable of ending everything on their planet. They had come close to using them. More than once. Each time, enough of them stopped. Then rebuilt. Kept going. 1 century stopped her reading completely. She went back through it 3 times. Within 100 years, this species had fought 2 global wars. Survived a pandemic that killed tens of millions. Deliberately detonated nuclear weapons in their own cities. Then rebuilt those cities from the ground up. Put a crew on their moon, and started reaching for other planets. 60 years from the nuclear detonation to the moon. Same species throughout. Same biology. Same 2 hands. Same soft skin. Same complete lack of natural armor or natural weapons. They had done all of it anyway. She put the data pad down and looked at the wall. She had been proud of Carvoth her whole life. She was still proud of it. Hardest world in the known galaxy. And that had always been true, and she wasn't stopping believing it now. But Carveth had made the Carvosi what they were. That was the root of it. The world makes the people. Carveth made her. She had always understood that as a kind of hierarchy, Carveth at the top and everything else at different distances below it. Earth was not below it. And the things Earth had made out of soft, unarmored, clawless creatures with 2 hands and no venom were already in the coalition. Already on this ship. Already sitting across from her in the mess hall talking about 50 million dead from a single pathogen as something that had happened, and then the world had continued. Because it had. She went to find Grail. He was in the observation room, alone, standing at the wide viewport with his hands behind his back. Awake. She had half expected that without knowing why. You knew, she said. About Earth's rating. Yes. Why didn't you say something? He turned from the window. Because 3 weeks ago, when you came aboard, you would have been polite about it, and you would have decided the analysts were generous. You would have moved on. He paused. You needed to see it before you could read it. She said nothing because he was right. How many coalition species know, she said. All of them. Every member. There is a reason humans were offered full coalition membership in the 3rd contact year instead of going through the standard evaluation period. And there is a reason the vote was unanimous. He looked at her. They had all been where you are right now. Every single one of them. Vreth thought about Sova talking about the ocean and the predators and the diseases without any fear in her voice. Not suppressed. Not managed. Just absent. That was simply home. That was just where she was from. They don't think of themselves as anything special, Vreth said. No, Grail said. They just think they're from Earth. She walked back to her quarters. She sat on the bunk and pulled up the message she had sent home 3 weeks ago. Read the last line. The word that translated as harmless. She closed it without replying. She didn't have the right words yet. She needed one more thing before she would. The first sign was a change in the hull vibration. Vreth caught it before the sensors did. She was in the corridor between rotations when the frequency of the floor shifted under her feet. Not mechanical. Something approaching from outside. She stopped walking. 3 seconds later, the proximity alert fired. Driven raiders. 2 ships. Already within boarding distance, which meant they had been running dark inside the debris field the Meridian had crossed 40 minutes ago. Patient approach. The Driven weren't sophisticated, but they knew that patience did most of the work. First boarding contact came through the lower port airlock. Vreth reached the junction before most of the crew, engaged the lead group without waiting for a team, and cleared the entry point in 90 seconds. She moved deeper. She fought the way she always had. Direct. No wasted motion. No announcement. She put down 3 of the boarding party in the first minute and kept moving. What the humans did in that same minute was different. Marin took a hit to the shoulder in the first corridor exchange. She saw it. The impact spun him half around. She expected him to pull back and reset. He didn't. He let the spin carry him, used the stumble as forward movement, put himself inside the raider's reach before the man could reset his own footing, and ended it from there. He had used the injury as part of the sequence. Vreth had seen that technique exactly once before, in Carvosi special unit training. She moved on. She passed the engine room. Small viewport panel in the door, hand-sized. She glanced through it as she went and stopped. Dale was at the core control board. 3 weeks aboard the Meridian, and she had barely registered him. Quiet. Technical. Not in any combat rotation. She had never thought about him twice. Blood on his face from a panel burst above the board. One eye swollen shut. He was reading the control characters with the other one, both hands moving across the board without slowing. She could read the board through the panel. The engine core was 2 steps from a failure cascade. If it went, the ship went with it. His hands did not stop. She moved on. She found Sova 2 corridors aft. 2 Driven raiders. No cover. Sova's weapon was on the floor 6 feet away, already lost in a previous exchange, and the 2 raiders were tightening the distance. Nothing in her hands. Vreth calculated the corridor and started moving. She was not going to be close enough. Sova didn't wait. Vreth watched her read the space in under 2 seconds. Wall angles. The gap between the 2 raiders. The coolant coupling on the left wall. Seal ring showing separation where the combat vibrations had been working it loose. She moved. Vreth didn't fully piece together what happened until it was already over. The sealing angle, one raider's momentum turned into the other, the coolant coupling releasing at the right moment into the right space. For seconds, both raiders down. Sova standing. She picked her weapon up off the floor, looked down the corridor. Saw Vreth. One nod. Same as the first day in the docking bay. Just acknowledgement, nothing more. The engagement ran another 11 minutes. The meridian held. The Dreven pulled back. After, Vreth found Sova sitting on the floor of the aft corridor, back against the wall, coming down from it slowly. The quiet after a real fight, when the body starts calculating what it actually cost. Vreth sat beside her. The ship settled around them. Distant voices. Systems resetting. The hull ticking as it cooled. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Vreth said, "Your world made you this." Sova thought about it. Our world made everything about us. We never thought that was special. We just called it survival. Vreth looked at the wall across from them. On Karvith, we tell our children they are from the deadliest world there is. We say it the way other species say they are from old worlds or great worlds. It's part of what we are. She stopped. I think we've been wrong. For a long time. Sova didn't argue. She didn't look like she'd won anything. She looked at the same wall and said, "Earth isn't the deadliest. It just never let us be weak. Maybe that's why we're still here." Vreth went back to her quarters an hour later. She sat on the bunk and opened her comm, pulled up the message she had sent home 3 weeks ago. Read the last line one more time. The word that translated as harmless. She deleted everything. Opened a blank message. Held the cursor there. Then she wrote, "There is a species aboard this vessel. They come from a world that should have killed them before they could ever stand upright. It did not. You need to know their name." She sent it. Set the comm down. The ship hummed around her, steady and low. For the first time since she had boarded the Meridian, it didn't sound empty.